According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, in July 2023, there were 6.9 million workers, about 4.3% of all employed Americans, whose job was classified as contingent, meaning they had no expectation that it would last. At the same time, a McKinsey survey found that 36% of the U.S. workforce, roughly 58 million people, now identify as independent workers, including contractors, freelancers, temps, and gig workers. Companies keep insisting they can't find workers, yet they're firing thousands at the same time. Behind the layoffs, talent shortages, and complaints about nobody wanting to work, a deeper shift is unfolding. One that's quietly rewriting how millions earn a living. It's a strange contradiction that reveals a hidden side of corporate America.
200,000 and counting. That's the number of tech workers who've been fired this season.
Layoffs at Google is costing the company more than its culture. The tech giant spent almost $3 billion in severance and related packages after 12,000 employees were laid off in the last year.
The past few years have exposed something companies hoped no one would question. On one hand, they're announcing mass layoffs like it's an everyday routine. Thousands of employees let go in a single press release. Whole departments erased overnight. But almost in the same breath, those same companies go on camera claiming they just can't find enough workers. It's a paradox so obvious that people started asking if something else was going on behind the scenes. Some analysts believe this contradiction isn't an accident at all. Rumors suggest that certain companies use layoffs as a strategic move, a way to reassure investors during shaky markets, cut expenses fast, or even prepare for a future where long-term employees are more of a liability than an asset. And yet, while those layoffs grab headlines, the whispers about labor shortages keep the blame off the corporations and push it onto everyday workers. But the deeper you look, the more it becomes clear. The system itself is outdated, and companies are bending it in ways that hide the real cause of the chaos. Because the truth is, the modern workforce isn't failing, it's evolving. And what comes next will change everything about how we work, earn, and survive. But this contradiction is only the beginning. What broke the system in the first place goes all the way back to a rule we stopped questioning decades ago. Long before today's chaos, the entire working world was built around a schedule designed for factories, not modern life. The 9-to-5 wasn't created because it made sense. It was created because companies like Ford needed a way to control predictable assembly line labor. Back then it worked. A worker on a factory floor could produce the same output every hour, so paying them for a fixed block of time actually made sense. But fast forward a century and almost no one works like that anymore. Most people aren't tightening bolts on a conveyor belt. They're solving problems, answering clients, dealing with unpredictable workloads, or juggling tasks that spike one day and vanish the next. Yet, companies still force everyone into a rigid 40-hour box, even when the work doesn't fit. That mismatch created a quiet disaster. On slow days, people sit for hours pretending to be busy just to fill time. On chaotic days, they're expected to stay late, push through exhaustion, and put in reasonable overtime that never gets paid. And all of it exists because businesses refuse to update a system that was designed for a completely different era. But this outdated structure didn't just waste time. It opened the door for something companies would take full advantage of, because once the 9-to-5 started breaking, the real pressure landed directly on the workers trapped inside it. And what happened next pushed people to their limits in a way no one saw coming. Once companies realized the 9-to-5 no longer matched the reality of modern work, they didn't fix the system. They pushed the cost onto workers. The result was a kind of chaos that hit from both sides. When there wasn't enough work, people were stuck sitting at their desks trying to look busy for 8 hours just to avoid being labeled unproductive. But when the workload spiked, suddenly those same workers were expected to stay late, answer messages after hours, and push through mountains of tasks without a single extra dollar. Reports from the last few years show unpaid overtime reaching levels that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Some employees silently put in dozens of extra hours each month, while others drown under deadlines that should have been handled by entire teams. Teams that no longer exist because of budget cuts.
In the U.S., 8.4 million people in the nation are working multiple jobs.
850,000 jobs.
wages went up for American workers.
Instead, they're working multiple jobs. It's called being overemployed.
But then came a twist no one expected. Workers started adapting. A growing number began min-maxing the system, secretly holding multiple full-time remote jobs. At the same time, they weren't chasing ambition, they were trying to survive. And on the other side, millions turned to side gigs or weekend shifts just to keep up with rising bills. The system was breaking and everyone knew it. But instead of restructuring the work week or hiring more staff, companies made a different move. One that would reshape the entire job market and turn traditional employment on its head. What came next wasn't a fix. It was a complete shift in how labor works. And it started with the rise of an entirely new type of workforce. As the traditional work model started cracking, companies found a loophole that gave them everything they wanted: gig workers and private contractors. Once that door opened, the shift happened faster than anyone expected. Gig apps exploded first. Suddenly, anyone with a phone and a bike could start earning money within an hour. No interviews, no resumes, no waiting weeks for a manager who might ghost them anyway. For millions stuck in low-wage jobs, that freedom felt like a lifeline. Work whenever you want, stack apps, grind for extra cash on your own terms. It wasn't perfect, but at least you controlled the clock. Then higher skilled workers followed. Developers, designers, nurses, consultants. Many realized they could make more selling their skills directly instead of staying tied to a permanent role. And businesses loved it. Paying someone only when you need them is far cheaper than keeping a full-time employee with benefits. And some corporations even shifted to contract labor to avoid long-term obligations. Soon, massive tech companies joined in, with contractors quietly outnumbering employees. And cutting them didn't count as layoffs, letting firms slash costs without spooking investors. It looked like a win-win, until the hidden costs of that freedom became impossible to ignore, especially for anyone trying to turn flexibility into stability. On the surface, gig work and contracting look like freedom. No boss watching the clock, no rigid schedule, no begging for time off. But once people stepped into this new system, they realized the fine print was brutal. The moment you become a contractor, you also become your own HR department. Suddenly, you're responsible for everything a traditional employer used to cover: health insurance, taxes, licensing fees, training, equipment, even your own downtime. Those costs stack up fast, and many discovered that the higher pay they expected disappeared the moment reality hit their bank account. For gig workers, it's even harsher. Private health insurance can be so expensive that many skip it entirely. Delivery drivers racing through late-night traffic often can't afford the protection they actually need. And when something goes wrong, the platforms they work for don't step in, because legally, they aren't employees. Meanwhile, companies save millions by avoiding benefits, severance, retirement plans, and long-term commitments. If they need to cut costs, they simply stop assigning work. No layoffs, no headlines, no responsibility. Some reports say this shift wasn't accidental. It was the goal: a cheaper, replaceable workforce. And the people hurt most are those stuck in the middle, unable to go gig or freelance, trapped in a collapsing system. While companies praise flexibility and contractors chase higher pay, a huge group is caught in the crossfire: the regular workers stuck in the middle. They're not in roles that can turn into gig jobs, not specialized enough to charge premium contractor rates, and no longer protected by the old promises of job security. Instead, they're trapped in a system disappearing beneath their feet. To keep operating, many companies now rely on staffing agencies, middlemen who technically employ the workers but offer none of the stability of a real job. These workers get all the restrictions of permanent employment and none of the benefits. No real protections, no long-term path, no leverage. And it gets worse. If contractors file for unemployment or claim they were treated like employees, companies face massive penalties. To avoid that, businesses distance themselves even more, pushing people through agencies that take a cut and eliminate any chance of being hired full-time. The result is a growing workforce stuck in limbo, essential enough to keep, yet too expensive to employ directly. Expected to act like loyal staff, treated like temporary labor. For millions, this collapse of traditional work isn't theoretical, it's daily life. And the system replacing it is built to protect companies, not people. The collapse of the 9-to-5 didn't happen overnight. It's been unraveling quietly for years, and now the cracks are impossible to ignore. What once formed the backbone of the American workforce is becoming a relic. Businesses have realized that maintaining a large full-time staff is expensive and risky, while contractors, gig workers, and automated systems cost less, scale faster, and come with none of the long-term obligations traditional employees depended on. Some experts think this shift is intentional. Rumors suggest major corporations are preparing for a future where permanent employees are rare, replaced by labor hired only when needed. No pensions, no long-term benefits, no real stability. Just on-demand work. And as AI automates more tasks, companies have even more incentive to minimize their payroll. This isn't a trend, it's a full restructuring. A move away from predictable careers and toward a marketplace where workers are interchangeable. For companies, it's ideal. Lower costs, fewer responsibilities, and total freedom to expand or shrink staff without consequences. For everyone else, it raises a frightening question. If the 9-to-5 dies, what replaces it? The next phase of work won't resemble the one we expected, and depending on where you land, it could mean new freedom or a fight for scraps in an economy that no longer values stability. The contradiction at the center of this story, companies firing thousands while claiming they can't find workers, isn't a glitch. It is the system stability is fading. Long-term careers are disappearing, and the old promise that loyalty guarantees security is collapsing. The 9-to-5 is being replaced by short-term labor, constant turnover, and workers who can be swapped out the moment profits dip. Some will thrive. High-skill contractors and gig workers will find opportunity. But millions stuck in the middle won't, and it raises a bigger question. If companies no longer want long-term employees, what happens to the idea of a stable career or a predictable future?